So welcome to our Windows 10 kind of community discussion thing, which I believe is up to its third iteration now. And what has just happened, obviously, in the last week or so, we have another update of Windows 10. We have the Fall Creators update has come out there. And I hope nobody would hear that noise, because that's my reminder kicking off. It better not make it into the final recording. There you go. Yes, so we've had the Fall Creators update, and I know me and Kev were actually doing a webinar a few days ago. Was it a few days ago, or was it even last week? It was last week. So there you go. Shows how much it was last week. Time flies when you're having fun, clearly. Where we were talking about, first of all, what's the sort of new things within there. And I guess the main thing from just specifically talking about the Fall Creators update as it is, really, is things like the OneDrive selective sync, which I know me and you, Kev, because we actually use OneDrive, we actually found that quite a useful feature to be thrown in there, really.
Yeah, it actually worked well today as well. I've been offline for a few days because I've been down London on holiday with the kids and the wife, and come back and put my Windows 10 on. It simply changes up, didn't put everything up and down. It worked quite well, I'm pleased to say. So, yeah, seems to work well.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Yeah,
that's,
nice, really nice feature, I think. What I was surprised, I had it to download separately, the new client. It was not bundled with the Fall Creators update, so I had to do a manual upgrade of the OneDrive client on my side.
Yeah, and that's something I know they're working on, to integrate that in the normal Windows update behavior. So for some reason they have, you could be a bit out of sync when you upgrade from an old Windows version to 1709, but you could also just wait for Windows Update and it will install again. But then again, that's the feature we want. So many have done it the same way as you have. And that's only one of the new features in OneDrive, which is kind of amazing and getting even better now.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting discussion to have around the kind of file syncing technology, because there's so many players out there, yet I think we certainly find that a lot of people are talking about OneDrive specifically because it's part of the operating system near enough, and it's obviously doesn't come with extra costs attached, particularly if you've adopted Office 365. But that might be something we'll come back to when James jumps on the line, because I know he does a lot of share file. The reason I know this is because whenever anybody posts anything in the share file Slack, it's always him. So
true.
He must be doing a lot of share file stuff. So I'll be interested to see what his experience is like that. But certainly, I think OneDrive is. I mean, I was at my sort of current project today, and they came along and said, "Oh, can we put OneDrive in this?" So it's almost like the default go-to sync sort of version for people out there. Right, and another of the things that we've got out there, I think the Linux subsystem as well is now fully functional out there. And Kev, I think you were saying the other day, weren't you, talking about some possible use cases for the Linux subsystem out there?
Yeah, we do a lot with government, and a lot of the applications are moving from Windows platforms to HTML5 platforms, and you see a lot of developers going around with MacBooks and stuff because they want to be using like Linux type OSs. So with that built in there, I can see the use case there. A lot of people moving back to the Windows 10 platform and not having to use Macs or VMs and stuff. So it's built into the OS, so it looks quite good and looks promising, that.
Yeah, and just the fact that you get more than one distribution now, that's something I know some of my colleagues, especially the ones that are working with Linux as well, is quite happy about, so that they can choose their preferred distribution.
Which distributions are currently officially supported? SUSE and Red Hat, I guess?
And Ubuntu.
Okay.
Yeah, so those three.
Yeah, right. It is just specific sort of distributions of it. It's not just, you can't just chew on. I haven't really looked at it, to be honest, but last time I did.
And you basically get it via the Microsoft Store now.
Yeah.
So you can just download it as an app, basically.
Yeah, right, cool. That's interesting. We did also have in there, one of the things that was talked up quite heavily was this sort of pinning of contacts to the taskbar, which I thought sounds quite a good idea, actually, because, you know, I often find myself going into Skype and finding a contact and sending an instant message and stuff like that. So it's a bit, not clunky, but there's quite a bit of clicking involved in getting to that stage. So I tried to do it, and I admit I haven't tried particularly hard yet, but I managed to get it to sync my my email contacts, but not my Skype contacts, which was really annoying because it's the Skype contacts are the ones that I really want. It should. And it's Skype for Business I was talking about. Should you be able to, has anybody done any work with that? Should you be able to sync the Skype for Business contacts into the People app so you can pin them or not?
I don't know.
I don't know. I'm trying to make Office 365. Sorry. Go on.
Sorry. Yeah, I don't think you're supposed to. It's basically a consumer feature at the moment. I also agree it would be great to integrate it with Skype for Business and so on. But looking at it, you can't even add Outlook, as far as I'm aware.
Oh,
Yeah.
So it should really be universal Windows apps, which I guess we'll get back to later on.
Yeah, we can't talk about Windows 10 without talking about Windows platform apps. Sadly, it seems to be something that keeps on coming up. There is also more of the sort of mixed reality sort of stuff making its way slowly in there. Again, for enterprise, not really something that's taken off. I mean, if we had someone like Thomas Poppelgaard on the line, he would probably have about 1,000 use cases for that sort of thing that he can come up with. But at the minute, other than sticking a headset on and overlaying some part of your environment with a picture or something like that, can't see a lot of use for that there in the enterprise yet. But they are starting to overhaul the interface a bit as well. They've got this new thing called Fluent Design, which I think is possibly what was codenamed Project Neon before. So they look like they might be overhauling the interface a bit again.
They are. And actually, I purchased a Tobii 4C today, the eye tracking device that you actually can use in 1709 now. And it works really well with Fluent Design because you're much more aware of where you are when you're looking at the screen. Oh. And I guess that could be something that will come more and more to mixed reality as well.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah.
Is there also a new hardware of HoloLens in the pipeline? Somebody knows?
No, they are actually, they had a HoloLens version 2 that were supposed to be released this year or early next year, but they decided that wasn't good enough improvement over the existing one. So they'll probably release HoloLens 3 late next year or probably 2019. So they are focusing on the mixed reality headsets now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think mixed reality has become more the focus rather than the sort of full replacement, hasn't it? But the other thing that I kind of, from an enterprise perspective, really, that I think sort of almost it's not a new thing with the Fall Creators Update. I think it came along with the Creators Update, but it's the Windows Autopilot stuff for deployment. Now, I think that looks particularly interesting, actually, the Windows Autopilot stuff, because it's almost like it's kind of like the Apple device enrollment program stuff, where you can basically, you don't have to do a complicated operating system deployment. You literally just, you connect up to the cloud and you give it the MAC address or whatever else it needs, and then it literally just goes straight down there and brings it all into management and gets it all sorted out for you, which I think could be quite interesting, although it does need quite a bit of sort of prerequisites in place that a lot of people might not have so far, like Windows Store for Business and Azure AD subscriptions and things like that. But I think that's something that, from a business perspective, could be quite important, really.
Yeah, it's a really long-awaited feature for us. We're implementing some sort of bring your own device program at our school, and would like to manage them with Intune, and especially when coupled to Intune, I think it's a very interesting feature now.
Yeah, and I see a huge potential as well, especially in schools, but also for knowledge workers, bring your own device, choose your own device in particular. And the features that are in there today is quite good, and the ones that are upcoming is even better. And they'll focus quite heavily on that and integrate it with Config Manager as well moving forward, and on-prem AD as well.
All right.
So that's also one new feature, the ability to join both to local AD and Azure AD simultaneously.
Yeah.
And that's something that many of my customers are looking at and say, why? And then they realized that that's a great way to start the migration, and that you can get so many great features from Azure AD that you can't get from your local AD. So you get the best of both worlds, and that makes also the move to the cloud when you're ready, if you're ready, a lot easier.
I think local Active Directory will become more and more just an identity provider, and not as much a management tool for your hardware, and device management will go over to the cloud.
Yeah, I think a lot of people sort of make the mistake of thinking that Azure AD is just AD in the cloud. Where it's not. It's got a lot more features and a lot more of the federated service about it. It's more like almost a subscription point, really, isn't it? Rather than a sort of management point like the domain used to be. You know, you bring your machine along, you subscribe to various services, and you use that logon ID within there as the gateway to that. It's a lot different, really.
Yeah, totally agree.
Cool. So what we also have to mention really with the Windows 10 Fall Creators Update is what's gone away in that as well, because we do have deprecated features within there as well. And he just says he looks for his list of stuff that got removed. One of the interesting ones, some of the interesting ones, we've got the enhanced mitigation, I can't remember the rest of its name, something toolkit, is it exploit toolkit?
Enhanced mitigation experience toolkit.
That's it, yes, thank you. I knew somebody would correct me. Has now been absorbed into the sort of suite that contains Windows Defender as well, so that's almost part of the core operating system. What other things have gone? Server message block, SMB version 1 is now removed from new installs, which is really good news. The computer browser service is gone from there as well. But obviously, if you already have it enabled and you do an upgrade, it will stay there. So if you've got some horribly insecure software that you need that for, then it won't go away just by doing the upgrade. So it's only for new installs. I think that's good from a security perspective, although there is still quite a lot of stuff out there, really old apps that I can, the current client that I'm working with at the minute, I can imagine if we disabled SMB version 1, most of their enterprise apps would probably collapse. But yeah, in general, it's quite a good thing, I think. And the bit that I've been meaning to do some work on, and I haven't been fathomed it out yet, is the tile data layer database that controls those live tiles and whatnot on the start menu. Apparently has been deprecated, and it's moved it to a tile store folder instead, which my quick bit of investigation seems to hint might be sort of in a Universal Windows Platform app folder instead. Does anybody know where that's officially gone to, or is it just too soon, really?
I actually haven't noticed that until now. So thanks for pointing that out. I don't have a clue about what that actually will mean.
It's mainly for us in sort of EDI type environments where we often get, requirements to sort of roam this sort of stuff around from desk to desk in non-persistent environments. So it's a bit of a whack-a-mole thing because we just got used to dealing with the database and now it's toddled off somewhere else instead. I get the feeling that they're going to sort of almost try and integrate that into enterprise state roaming, which really we haven't heard that much about since. It's still, I think it's out of beta now, but the last I spoke to Dan Bolton, who was doing some work with it recently, Mr. Toilet Man, as he is now known, after the last time on here, and it's actually his wife's birthday today, so Dan couldn't be here. He couldn't come up with a decent enough excuse to get away from that. But he said enterprise state roaming just wasn't ready as far as he was concerned to handle anything. He said there just wasn't enough stuff in there, especially for the browser. But I think that's where it's going to end up. But I haven't managed to go and do any digging and find out precisely where it's gone. So it's definitely in there somewhere, though. So obviously it wouldn't work. So interesting.
I'm still hoping tiles will go away with the death of Windows Phone now. I don't see many points of this tile concept, but
I love the tiles. I want tiles.
I know, Simon.
I think that,
but I get your point. In the scenarios you guys are usually working with, I totally understand why you don't want them and why it's horrible to manage. And that's like we said before, the live tiles are a consumer feature.
Yeah.
which you can use in some cases in enterprise, but it's a consumer feature, so that's why we don't have, and a private feature in many ways. That's why we can't manage it, which we should be able to do.
Yeah, I think it might be even like, I remember when XP came out and everybody wanted the Windows 2000 sort of look and feel. They gave that, that classic view option. It was almost like a bit of a backport for a period of time. I guess till people just sort of got used to it, really, which is often sometimes that all that people need is kind of almost a cooling off period that they can adapt themselves to it instead of it being a big bang. But it's interesting that I was reading something the other day written by a guy over at Microsoft, and he said we've got to try and get people away from this problem they've got if that you move a button or you move a checkbox, a few inches to the side, that 90% of your users all of a sudden can't find it. We've got to kind of get them away from this mentality. And he did say that mobile phones are probably helping in that respect, because I do notice, when Android upgrades occasionally, I think, hang on, where's that gone? And you have to go and do a bit of a double take and find it, so that if people get used to, well, hopefully if their Android phones are the ones that actually keep up to date, or if they've got iOS or whatnot, then they might get used to the fact that things will shift around a bit occasionally, and it might be easier for them to digest changes like that in future.
Yeah, and that's
Sorry. I saw a blog post last week. It was a guy wrote, let it up to the users to manage the tiles thing. Don't manage the tiles, let it to the user.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, there's always been that kind of thing, because I remember back in about 2003, 2004, where we had a lot of security incidents, and it was kind of like, yeah, we must manage everything because the users can't be trusted. And it's kind of like sort of gone away from that a bit now. People want to give their users a bit of choice because it makes for a happier user, because they like having a bit of choice, they like doing things in certain ways. But, I guess if we just let the users have kind of free reign almost, there's got to be some level of enterprise sort of steer around there somewhere. Otherwise, we're going to come back full circle, and we're going to spend all day digging the users out of problems that they've managed to cause themselves by, losing stuff or configuring it strange and things like that. So I guess we've just got to, you've got to allow them a certain aspect of freedom to keep them happy, but also there's got to be some sort of level where you can manage it, or at the very least just reset it back to some sort of default, and the user kind of accepts the fact if they screw it up that it's going to get reset. So yeah, that's the way we've got to live.
And that's one of the new features as well. What's it called? I can't find it. You actually have a new feature that does exactly that.
All right. Is that on an operating system level, or just a sort of profile-based level, or?
Operating system level. So a bit on the way, at least. What's the name of it? I can't find it. You have. I'll get back to you when I have the name.
Not to worry. I'm sure I can dig it up and pencil it in a caption.
Yeah, the Windows automatic redeployment.
All right. I'll have to look that
up. Which is basically a way to quickly remove personal files, apps, and settings.
Okay.
Yep. And that requires and you get back. You keep the Azure AD join and the device management, but you return to a fully configured, IT approved state, and I'm reading from the documentation now, and that's actually a great way to do it, because that's one of the arguments that I've had against modern management from several of my customers. What happens when we need to reinstall the PC? Yeah, you do it like this, and everything will be as good as new.
Yeah, right. Cool.
So that's new in 1709 as well.
Excellent. A few other bits. Outlook Express code has finally been removed from Windows. I can't believe it's taken that long to get rid of it. I had no idea it was still under the hood there. Microsoft Paint has been moved to the Windows Store disastrously, so I've had to.
Not yet.
Is it not in the store?
No. I still have it on mine.
Yeah, right. I'll have to check on mine.
Yeah, it will be moved to the Windows Store eventually, but they won't develop it anymore. And I would like to know when was the latest time they added anything to Paint.
Yeah, I've literally been using it for screenshots for years. I say, Jim.
Yeah. That's what people use it for, and it's great for that.
I've had.
Hey guys.
Hi, James. You okay?
Yeah, grand.
Hi, James.
Good.
How are we doing?
Not too bad. I actually just mentioned you earlier on because we were talking about OneDrive selective sync, and everybody was saying, "Oh yeah, OneDrive's quite popular." But I did say that you must do a lot of ShareFile because whenever anyone posts on Slack about ShareFile, it's always you. So, do you have a lot of ShareFile deployments out there? Do you see a lot of people taking the likes of ShareFile or even other options ahead of OneDrive? Or
Yeah, we have what? I have one particular customer at the moment, and that's kind of why I've been posting on Slack.
right?
They're very particular in what they want, so I've had to amend it from the kind of bog standard share file, and they're always asking for new things. So it's kind of just I've had to tweak it. But I think we have 5 or 6 customers at least who are using ShareFile. The main reason we do it is because they're already XenApp customers, so
Right.
we kind of set, get them on board that way. So, but yeah, they all seem to like it. I have to say, I suppose it kind of gets around a lot of the limitations that OneDrive has and stuff. So, and it can integrate with OneDrive as well. So, it can integrate with OneDrive, SharePoint, normal network shares. So, yeah.
Citrix wants to position it new as the enterprise feature, go more to the enterprise market with ShareFile, I have read, and go away from just a SMB tool.
Yeah, I saw that was to do with all the layoffs in North Carolina.
Yeah.
It was around that repositioning, as far as I know.
And we have quite a few customers using ShareFile at quite large scale in Sweden. And I've, you won't believe this, I've actually been pushing ShareFile quite hard to get OneDrive working, for example, in school, VDI, and so on, prior to the placeholders. And I honestly still believe that even if we have placeholders and all the new features to OneDrive, there will still be use cases for ShareFile to enable the features that aren't in OneDrive yet.
Yeah,
and also like you said, James, the ability to get all your file shares, your storage solutions, whatever, in one app with all the features you get from ShareFile. That's still quite unique and very valuable to customers, and that will also help them move from like their home folders, share folders, whatever, to OneDrive or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
some of the bits we've been looking at as well. Like in-house, we use Podio quite a bit. We've been looking at Octablue.
Really?
Yeah. So we've been using this in-house as a project. So James will tell you that. So whatever we try to sell or use, we eat our own dog food. So that's what we do. We use Office 365. We use these products. So yeah, the entire team uses it. So it has a few creaks, and it's a good product.
And of course, you guys are using FS Logics, aren't you?
Yeah, we've got that there as well, yeah, so we've got the whole lot, but there's some bits as well, and the bit that we see, obviously, usably, this is GDPR, everybody talks about it every day, but ShareFile seems to have a strong case over, like, OneDrive for business from the GDPR perspective. We've seen a lot of clients, especially in the financial and legal sectors, got a lot of interest in that, so that's something we'll see probably may increase, but we're not experts in that, but we're seeing a lot of interest in there.
Yeah, I think where ShareFile kind of beats OneDrive is the auditing is very good on ShareFile.
Yeah.
Everything is audited. Now, the only downside I've found to it from that perspective is it has a whole reporting mechanism built into it. But as you may have seen on Slack, the reporting server is on the East Coast. So all the reports are coming out with an Eastern Standard Time.
Right.
So you have to factor everything by 5 hours, and my customers are not very happy.
Yeah, but that has to be possible to change.
Stephanie looked into it and asked ShareFile support for me, and they said they are prioritizing the workflows over it at the moment. It's not a high demand feature. So I'm a
with
bit
the
perplexed.
European Citrix cloud, maybe now this will.
Well,
will
yeah,
go forward.
maybe. Yeah, well, the control plane is already European, so it's just this reporting aspect which is US based.
Interesting. So, so there are some options, some alternatives to OneDrive actually in use. Probably more around Citrix customers. I can't see people going for it as a standalone buy, but you never know.
We have been using it as a standalone as well.
Yeah, we're starting to pitch it more from the workflow perspective built into it. We were looking at a particular. I think we did a tender. I don't know if we got it, but it was basically for some sort of exam correction type thing for a third level college, and basically it was to do with external examiners, and they were sending in exams, and there was a whole workflow behind it, and just due to the simple workflows, we weren't even selling it as like a file sharing. It was more to do with this kind of particular academic angle on it. So I don't know if how that ever progressed. I was just involved in the tender process, so I haven't heard much about it. But there is aspects of ShareFile where you don't really even need to. The workflow stuff is quite cool in it as well, and very simple. So
yeah, and we have had quite a few public customers, at least previously, that have been looking into ShareFile to get a OneDrive style feature on-prem.
Yeah.
This is one of the big downsides of this. Half the features of ShareFile don't work on-prem. Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. But they have decided that it's better than nothing, and it's better than work folders or whatever that Microsoft can provide. And in that case, it was simple file storage, basically, that should be available. So that's something we have been doing a few years ago, at least.
Yeah.
Really cool. Anyway, so I did have a sort of biggie sort of subject to talk about, because I know we spent the last two of these talking quite a lot about servicing.
We just bitched about Windows 10. In fairness, like that's what we did last time.
Yeah. Well, it's always good. But anyway, with where recently the Windows branches have now changed a bit, rather
again.
Yeah, but as I said, I've spent about 18 months going around preaching to people about CB and CBB and LTSB, and now they've changed it all. So they haven't just changed the names. We now just have kind of two channels, don't we? We have the semi-annual channel and the long-term servicing channel. And I think Citrix have got their message screwed up a bit, because Citrix keep referring to semi-annual channel targeted, which was the old current branch, and semi-annual channel broad. But I got sent some stuff just a couple of weeks ago by a guy on Twitter, and it's a good job he did, otherwise my presentation last week would have been rubbish, because it would have all been wrong. But the semi-annual channel basically gets released, and then it's down to you in the enterprise to decide for yourself when it goes to that broader deployment. Now, if I'm understanding this right, Simon, you can probably chime in on this. So Microsoft are no longer going to declare that it's ready for broad deployment, or are they going to say, we think it's ready now, but you can still do it whenever you want? Is that how it's more or less intended to work?
They will declare it a semi-annual channel release broad. They'll still be doing that.
It's about 4 months after.
Yeah, 4 to 6 months. They are a bit unclear on that and giving themselves a bit of slack by saying that it will be broad release when it's done. When they decide that enough hardware, softwares are good to go, they will declare it semi-annual channel release broad.
So they they say to you, you can declare when it goes from your own kind of pilot to broad.
Yeah.
You aren't advised doing it until they actually say, yeah, it's good to go.
Yeah, exactly. They are giving us a bit more flexibility there, where you can let it out in your organization for testing purposes, or if you want to include a new feature or whatever. But then they will declare it. And looking at like the upgrade analytics, the Intune management of the deployment rings and so on, they still will be doing that, because you can put it in. And Intune, that's actually interesting, and I mentioned that in my session today, that Intune haven't changed it yet. So in Intune, it's still CB and CBB. But then again, like I said, I prefer the old names. I think they make more sense. But the important thing, and like we mentioned last time, the most important thing is that we have a fixed date for when the support ends. It's 18 months from release, and that's it. That's the absolute best thing
The grace period's now been factored into that, hasn't it? So there's no grace period anymore.
Nope.
You've just got that. And the way I looked at it, you're never ever going to have more than 3 versions out there at any one point in time.
Yeah.
And that's only if you're ahead and a bit behind, really, more a bit of an agile kind of release schedule out there. So you could, depending on the features in between, you could say, I'll deploy this version and then we'll sit with it for 18 months and then we'll deploy a new version, and all the testing can sit inside that 18 months.
Yeah, and that's what I'm telling my customers as well. Of course, Microsoft tells you to upgrade as fast as possible. They want to show that people are adopting Windows as a service. But again, if you don't see the reason to upgrade, don't rush it. Like, there's no reason to rush it. Some of your users will be needing features that are in the latest release, but most of your users will be perfectly fine with a 12-month-old release. The only thing to consider there is don't be too slow, because when it's 1 month left and you have 80% of your organization still on a soon unsupported release, that will prove hard. But again, don't rush. You have 18 months. Use 18 months if you want to.
But that's even 18 months. That's a huge change for most customers. Like, they generally do a refresh months every 5 years if you're lucky. So that's going to be a huge mindset change to be doing upgrades every 18 months. I
think it is, but I think there was a lot of panic around before, whether everyone was like, "Oh my God, we're going to have 3 new versions every year," and it was too much for people. And I'm wondering if it's a bit like, when a politician wants to get anything done, they basically say something a lot worse than what they want, and everybody jumps up and down about it. So then they dial it back a bit, and everybody thinks it's okay, and they get what they wanted in the first place. I can't help, I might be being cynical, but Microsoft almost made it so aggressive, and everyone went, no, you can't do that. So they said, okay, we'll give you 18 months. Everyone's like, right, we can live with that. So they've got it accelerated to 18 months anyway, so they might have achieved what they wanted to set out to do.
Yeah, and for testing purposes, you actually have 24 months, because you have the insider previews as well. And now we have the insider preview for business, insider program for business.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So that's Azure AD based.
So
that's Azure AD based.
Oh, excellent.
Yep. Azure AD based, you are able to actually deploy Windows Insider builds. You can manage that using Intune or Config Manager. And the single best thing, you can actually use the feedback hub for internal reasons, for internal use. So people can use Windows Insider for Business inside their organization, use the feedback hub to send feedback, and Microsoft will get it, and you can see what feedback your users have sent. So you can get used for that as well.
That's
so the code base is the same as the Insider, the regular Insider?
Yeah. It's actually it's only 2 different ways to manage it. And I want to point out that it's, even if it's Windows Insider for Business, I don't recommend to use it on production PCs, because they gather so much telemetry that it's possible that some personal information may be sent over to Microsoft. They do not intend that, but for crash dumps and so on, it's possible that they will send it.
No, that's an interesting point, actually, because me and Kev were talking about this the other day in our presentation, when we said we've got all this upgrade analytics and upgrade readiness and things like that. They offer to let you in on all the telemetry to get some business benefit from it. But we were also talking about GDPR, and we weren't really. We said this is a bit of a huge grey area. Where does this telemetry sit with GDPR? Now, I know Microsoft are going to be trying to anonymise it as much as possible, but it's interesting that you said there with the Windows Insider ones, there is that possibility for a bit of slippage. And I mean, it depends how GDPR ends up being interpreted or sort of applied, really. But there is the sort of capability that people might worry, particularly people in sensitive environments, that maybe they should opt out of as much telemetry as possible until at least we're a bit clearer on how GDPR is going to work. Because I don't know how Microsoft are with the compliance with that, or whether they're going to hide behind privacy fig leaf or whatever it's called.
Yeah, they should be GDPR compliant. They don't say that, because that's really, you can't be GDPR compliant. There's nothing to say that you are compliant. But they, as far as I see it, the basic level of telemetry won't send any personal information that should be affected by GDPR. As soon as you turn full on, which may be the case if you are looking into the device health service in Azure OMS as well. Then it's possible that it will it will look at your blue screens, it will look at your crash dumps, it will look at anything, and it's possible that, for example, I had a colleague talking about one of our public health systems. If something crashed at that point when they are reading a journal or whatever, it's possible that something may be included in the crash dump, and that's something you need to take into consideration. But the basic level of telemetry, which is the ones you need for upgrade analytics and so on, shouldn't include any personal information. And if you're uncertain, you are able to, as far as I'm aware, export what telemetry data you have sent from a particular client and look at what has been sent, all the information, everything.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think there's probably, the more paranoid or, regulatory compliant out there might actually sit there and demand some evidence from Microsoft to see what's going across. But I think that, that it is still a bit of a sort of grey area. People want to get some sort of official confirmation, and it does, again, depend how aggressively the GDPR is going to be applied to people, because it is quite frightening, really, as to what potentially could happen around that. So, yeah. Interesting. So we've got all that. We've got the 18-month schedule now, which I think is good. I think that the way they've set the schedules out, we did sort of agree on that the other day, that it is better than it was. It's quick. It's a bit of a mindset change. Everybody's going to have to get used to a new way of doing things, but at least we know now where we stand. So hopefully that's going to be the way it will be forevermore, or at least for the next sort of 10 years or so, I suppose.
But James, some of the questions we see is like, how many customers do we know in the UK that still run like 3 or 4 environments? They've still got Zen 5 on 2003. They've still got Windows XP. We're talking large corporate. Basically, the reason to do that is because they've got applications which are business dependent, and they don't want to keep their systems online. But it's just the development life cycle. The people who wrote them have retired. They don't exist in the business anymore. Yeah. It's a difficult thing to transition them apps, and some of the timelines to fix them apps is like a 3-year piece of work, and you're talking millions of pounds to do that. So these businesses have got appetite to move forward, but it's just constrained by the apps and the people that do the work, and then shutting down these applications would shut down the business. So I don't know, I think it's a tough one, because we've still got Windows XP out there at large, and to say, we're doing this in 18 months time, you've got to do it, or we're cutting your arms off sort of thing, I think that's going to be a tough ask, and it's still going to pose a lot of challenges, like James mentioned earlier.
Yeah, they've got to.
Yeah, and I think one of the things is we've seen, obviously, Citrix are not like going to be straight out the door with 0-day support either. They published that article yesterday about how the creators update is not supported at the moment. So it's like people are going to have to take all of these factors into consideration. So it's just but yeah, I suppose 18 months for like some of the financials we deal with. No, fucking, it's just not going to happen. No. As you said, they still have XP. I was in there the other week. They had multiple XP machines lying around still, and I just looked away and went, I didn't even see that. I don't want to know. I
think a lot.
But then again,
sorry, go on.
Yeah, but then again, and we have those customers as well. Of course, they are all over the world in every sector, which have XP computers, old applications, whatever. But that's an important point to make. When and if they are able to migrate that to Windows 10, if they write it correctly, it shouldn't be an issue going between builds.
Yeah.
So, and I of course understand that it's extremely expensive in some cases.
I mean, you said if they write it correctly. That's a big point. Because we know with developers, it's like that's a huge thing.
Yeah, and that's actually something I've been planning to do, and I've sent that session proposal to several conferences. What do developers need to know to write code correctly in a Windows 10 servicing world? Because it's an issue, of course. But again, if you write it correctly, and we have to work together on that. As soon as you are on Windows 10, you should be okay. And note the should.
There's a lot of.
I don't know
vendors
what
out
your
there.
perception is. Sorry, James, go on.
Yeah, go on, man.
No, I was just going to say, like, some of the perceptions we're seeing is that a lot of businesses are sick of being tied to this Windows and Microsoft upgrade cycle, and we touched on it before, saying the development apps in Linux now and on Apple Macs, and it's client agnostic. They just want HTML5 based applications, so they can run them on any device. They don't want to be tied to Windows anymore because they're sick of being tied to this gun to the head upgrade mentality. So that's what we're seeing. A lot of these transformational apps not going build them for Windows 10. It's like get them away from the Windows platform and decouple it from that OS so they can move anywhere they need to be in the future.
Exactly, and that's what's coming in the next release, where we get support for progressive web apps.
Yeah.
And that will change everything. Because then it's really, you don't need to run Windows. You can run your app on anything, and it will be a great experience regardless of what OS you run it on.
Yeah.
And Microsoft understands that. That's why they're focusing on Office, they're focusing on Azure, they're focusing on developers, because they still want them to use their tools, their services, their cloud, because the people need and want the ability to choose whatever device they want.
Yeah.
So I think that's something, and sorry if I curse now, but that's something Gartner said last year as well at their conference.
God.
I'm sorry. I've been in this business development for half a year.
God.
But that's something they said that
the swear word.
that apps will be disappearing, and it's the web that will be the new thing, even though it may be packaged as an app.
I was going to say, but though, didn't we go through this before? Because that's why we've still got so many apps that only run in IE6, because everybody thought everything was going to be a web app, but they only run them all to run in IE6. And now I'm stuck with a great big list of apps where I work at the minute that I can't take off Windows 2003 because they need IE6. And the best thing is, you try and patch a Windows 2003 server with IE6 on, you can't go to Windows Update unless you've got Internet Explorer 7. So I had to write a packaged version of Internet Explorer 7 to get the updates for the IE6 machine. I don't know, maybe we might be going back down that same route.
Yeah, it could be.
Hopefully, the web standards now, it shouldn't end up like that. Touch wood.
I know. Yeah. But it touches on the point where we're talking about, like, where you see what sort of desktops that you see in schools and education now, where we're seeing lots and lots more Chromebooks now, and what happens is Windows 10, is it Windows 10S and stuff like that? What's that landscape going to look like in the apps? We don't know, but there's a lot of pinch points there. Like, we're seeing people now say, why pay a couple of hundreds of pounds or a few €100 for a thin client when I can get a Chromebook for like the same sort of price, and the kids can have the full desktop experience on there. They don't need a Windows OS, and they've got Office 365, that sort of thing. And that's what the kids are using today, and they're going forward and developing stuff on.
Yeah, and also, you can, with these Chromebooks, if you've got receiver, you can just, leverage Citrix off them as well. So, yeah, I can see the appeal of Chromebooks.
And I'm actually going. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say I can see the appeal. I don't want one myself, but I like my powerful laptop. But I can see the appeal, especially for kind of, if you are coming from a more web-based background.
We use them as. Sorry.
Oh yeah, go on, Rene.
We use them extensively as really cheap or affordable mobile SIM clients to access our Xen desktop farms or
which is running on
access cloud storage.
Grid cards. Yeah. It's not exactly a slow system you're running, in fairness now.
And actually, I'm visiting a customer next week with a Surface Laptop to show off Windows 10S. So Surface Laptop is the top end of those devices, but they've introduced both at Ignite and when they released Windows 10S, the new hardware for that, which is an attempt to tackle Chromebooks.
Okay.
And it will be really interesting because we will getting Windows 10S Enterprise now with all the enterprise features included, all the security ones, everything.
Okay.
So that will be very interesting. And sorry, I just wanted to go back to your. Sorry.
I was going to say, would the Windows 10S Enterprise still only allow you to run store apps, though, yeah?
Yes, store apps and the apps that Microsoft allows. Of course, there are some x86 apps that are allowed to run, like the ones that are included in the OS. But it's basically basically store apps, yes. And now we have iTunes, we have Spotify, we have Office, everything in it. So it's basically Chrome people are asking for. We have Citrix Receiver as well. So,
well, that's an interesting point, actually. Because talking about Citrix Receiver, I was just going to make the point about, because we can't get them without having a bitch about the UWP apps, but Citrix Receiver obviously is one of those which you put in there. But it's annoying because the Citrix Receiver does things like it doesn't pick up storefront branding or anything like that, which for the purposes I was doing kind of made it a bit useless. So I think the developers need to get more on board with the Windows Store apps, really, if they're going to take off, because competing against the Google Play Store is going to be a pretty tough ask if they're only going to be half-baked versions like the Citrix Receiver is, because I had to go back to the native receiver because it didn't pick up any of the branding, and it looked terrible. So, yeah, there's going to have to be some development push there.
Yeah, and looking at Spotify, I don't know if you have used the Spotify UVP version, but that's fully featured. It's the exact same client.
Really?
Yeah. So they have just done the desktop bridge, the Centennial conversion on it. And it's the same with iTunes and Office. They are the full-fledged apps, basically. On Office, you can't use your plugins and so on, of course. But the app in itself, that's fully fledged.
Okay. Will this, as enterprise, do you know if this will be part of the volume licensing agreement, so you can choose to put it on your own hardware?
I guess it should be, because they are really talking about it like Windows 10 Enterprise in S mode.
Okay.
So I guess you will be able to do it that way. And I know that some of our school customers with school agreements actually have Windows 10 S in their volume license inside. So I would guess so.
Okay.
And just to go back to your IE problem, James, and it doesn't work with like IE5 document mode in IE 11.
Right.
You need the full browser.
Right. Fair enough.
Yep. I'm terribly sorry.
As a browser, IE6 browser is just the absolute burn of my life at the minute. But it's an interesting point to raise, because again, what I was talking about before about how people are incapable of moving on. Some of the apps that we had that were in IE6. And they failed acceptance testing when we packaged them, and nobody went back. This was a bit of a fail, and nobody went back and asked why they'd failed. They just came back as failed. When I did a bit of investigation, they said it was failed because in the new package, which ran in IE 11, just emulated, it was opening up in tabs instead of new windows, and the users couldn't get their heads around that fact. And I was like, for God's sake, right? The app hasn't failed. It's just the behaviour of the software has changed, and they just marked it down as a fail because it didn't behave how it used to before. And that's why it's very important to get people past this mentality of, expecting everything to behave exactly the same from iteration to iteration, which is enormously frustrating.
Yep. That's something we are working quite hard on, to educate users in a efficient way and making them realize that this is something you actually want, if there is anything to want in a new Windows release, because for some users there may be nothing.
Yeah, that's fair enough. There's also what you were saying before about getting the sort of feedback hub stuff and that from insider builds, where you could even possibly put it out to like your sort of technology champions and whatnot, maybe as like a test workstation, and actually get the feedback directly from there, which would be quite interesting, because I've seen a lot of places where people have had to build their own sort of apps, or they're filling in Excel spreadsheets and things like that and putting them into SharePoint. If there was something integrated into the operating system that could do that, or is it already there, the feedback hub? No, it's just there to feedback to Microsoft, isn't it? It's not allowed to feedback to the business.
But it will when you sign up for Windows 10 Insider for Business.
Yeah, that would be quite useful.
And it's only included in the Insider previews as well.
Right, cool. I could say that being useful, particularly because obviously we have to do a lot of testing, so having some almost built-in way to track defects and feature requests possibly might be quite a useful thing, really. Interesting. Just want to ask there, actually, has anybody, talking about UWP apps, apart from Citrix Receiver, has anybody seen many of them out there in the wild? I think I've seen people using about 2 or 3, like VLC Media Player, and I don't know whether you class Edge as a UWP app or not, but is there any more out there? Or are people just trying to get...
Edge is crap.
that we have actually developed a few, mostly for like single-purpose use. It's been an efficient way to get things to work, and we also developed several apps for Surface Hub,
Really?
which requires UVP. Yep.
But so I think the thing is, I mean, from a security perspective, which obviously everybody's kind of swinging back towards security now, the modern apps or UWP apps are much better. But it's the apps that are heavily integrated within sort of other ones, you know, things with exports to Excel and Outlook functionality and stuff like that. They're going to be the tough ones, I guess, to do out there. So. Well, I mean, people are used to sort of almost containerized apps on their mobile phones, aren't they? So I don't know whether we could start getting down that sort of route on the desktop as well.
Yeah, and then now Microsoft is making it quite easy to do that, even though I fully understand if some find it a bit time-consuming. But only look at like Outlook. When you open a document, you can close it, go back to Outlook 2 hours later, and it will be in your attachments drop-down, which basically means you don't need any integration app to app as long as the OS supported.
Yeah, right. Yep. Yeah. As I say, there's not a lot I've seen out there yet, really.
No, you have a fair point. It's Surface Hubs, which it's not a portable device, so to say. But that's the point. I've seen it on Skype room systems, and the things I've seen is, to be honest, games.
Yeah. I think the last point I wanted to talk about was just with the Fall Creators update, just to almost close off, is how's the performance of Windows 10? As again, I know me and Kev talked about this last week, but it seems a lot more stable now. The early iterations of Windows 10, we had a lot of stability issues with apps. And I think it's also important that the vendors have kind of aligned, certainly Citrix and the likes of Ivanti have almost kind of aligned their release schedules with the Windows 10 release schedules. I don't know whether VMware have caught up yet or not. So, you know, I think that's part of the reason that we're seeing a lot more application stability on there. But it performs in general. I think if we're talking specifically VDI, I think if you go for full user experience on the device, we were saying that our sort of track ensured that Windows 7 and Windows 10, there's not much difference in terms of performance out there. Windows 10 performs as well as and on almost the same scale as Windows 7 did on VDI. So it does seem to be coming along quite well in that respect. So I was just wondering what other people's sort of opinions or experiences on the actual performance of the Windows 10 OS are.
Haven't actually deployed the latest update to it, so but like once you tune it, it does seem to perform pretty well. Like I've used the the VMware optimization tool. And
yeah, there's a Citrix one now as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't mention that. We've got to mention the Citrix one. We got wrong for that, didn't we?
Yeah. I haven't even looked at the Citrix one. Anyone actually?
It's just come out.
It's on Slack actually, James. There's Martin Zugek.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, but you're right. Once you do the optimizations through one of those tools, it does make it a lot slicker, really, especially on a VDI platform.
Go on, sorry, Rene.
That's one point, optimize, and the other point is you have to run your VDI on some decent hardware. You can't do it on legacy SAN architecture. You have to sync new and go with SSDs and all this stuff. And if you have this decent hardware, it runs perfectly smooth.
Yeah, if you read Jim's white paper on this, I think it was an old Atlantis one, he basically says that like this thing, you know, it will eat whatever disk you allow it to eat. So it kind of, you know, it just goes and goes. So you really do need something with good performance, like your traditional, you know, crappy SAN is not going to give you know, high utilization for VDI. You need, you know, your Nutanix and whatever else is out there.
Yeah, this is just Titanics, really, isn't it? What happened to Atlantis?
Well, yeah, because Atlantis is gone. No, actually, sorry, Atlantis is now
Still hanging in there. I think chapter 11 on there. Or still.
No, it's high by O now.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I'm on the ACE program. They sent me this email, and saying we're keeping the ACE program going, which is their kind of community program. And I'm like, oh, you may be keeping it going. I won't be selling this shit. Because I got burned badly by Atlantis, so there's no fucking way. I mean, I think I told you, James, about that before. So.
Yeah, I felt sorry for their customers, really, actually, Atlantis, when it happened.
Well, we've got one customer, and basically, I don't even breathe in the direction of that Atlantis platform. I just pray to God the thing doesn't even. I never have to touch it, basically.
Yeah. I mean, it's got to be difficult to handle it. I mean, I heard they were still selling them right up until the end, which is kind of a bit disappointing, really. But again, if you're struggling, what are you going to do? Anyway, we're supposed to be talking about Windows, not the death of Atlantis, really.
No, yeah, but yeah, as I said, just as Rene said, you do need some decent hardware under it to deliver it. So
yeah, we did notice that. We noticed that disk-wise, especially at sort of first log-on time, it is quite heavy on the disk, and you do get occasional spikes right throughout the session as it goes off and does whatever it's doing. But SSD did put something like an 86% reduction in calls from users who had an SSD fitted who previously.
Yeah, what I started doing is I didn't even reboot overnight. I just left them up, and so there was no boot storm in the morning or anything like that. I just left them up all night basically, and then you don't have to wait for it to stabilize, because that's what I did find when I did my login VSI testing was I had to wait like half an hour to 45 minutes for the bloody things to just stabilize. So, but then you got pretty good performance. So,
what about the GPU side of things as well? What's people's experience? I know it's a bit of a curveball, but obviously, I use a Surface Pro book locally. I've got the latest Windows 10 build on there. It works great. The GPU is great. Hardware is great, but when you go to VDI, obviously, people expect the same experience, don't they? So,
yeah. It definitely helps when you have GPU, but I wouldn't go that far that I would say don't do Windows 10 VDI without GPU. There are possibilities to do it without GPU.
We did it without GPU, and it would help because obviously everything is utilizing the bloody GPU these days, from the browsers to Office to everything. Basically, it's getting more and more prevalent, and
you get better density on your servers.
Yeah. It's just the extra cost of the GPU cards. So it's like
licensing and
on Windows 10 latest update, you can see your GPU usage in Task Manager as well.
Yeah, you can. Yeah.
And you can see which service host has got which service in it as well. I think that was the previous creators update, but that's a great addition from my perspective.
Yeah, so good question. Like back in the day in App Sense, you could control CPU per user, like CPU trim. Is there anything for like GPU trim and control and stuff on VDI? I haven't done much with it myself. So.
I don't know. I've actually just downloaded a copy of Vivanti's desktop now today because a client I'm working with has decided that they actually want to go ahead with using it a bit more. So I haven't looked at it for a long time. I don't know whether you can control GPU through that. It'd be an interesting one to fire at them. As I said.
But, Simon.
Yeah, I will do. I did actually speak to Simon today because I couldn't log into the website and I thought they'd lock me out, but it must have been user error because after I spoke to Simon, I got straight in. So you always go and shout with people on Twitter before just trying your password again, don't you? But,
it'd be good if you could do that because obviously we talk about GPU being an expensive resource, so not all VDI users use it. But if you could control it and do profiles around it and turn it on and off and flex it as when you need, I think it'd be a good thing.
Absolutely.
Cool.
But then when you get to the stage with GPU where justifying the cost of it, if it's only for certain and then your server density and that kind of thing, or maybe if you just had specific servers with only a couple with GPU and then specific use cases. So you could have a mixed farm of non-GPU and GPU enabled servers. Yeah, that could work.
Right, on that note, I'm pretty aware that we're coming up to the end, and thank God it's half term, because the kids should have been in bed a long time ago on my end, but never mind. Right, thank you very much, guys. That's been excellent. As I say, we've hopefully covered off all of the sort of pertinent points for people out there under Windows 10 Fall Creators Update. So thank you very much for your time, and I will get this all sort of tidied up and posted out and send all you guys a link when it's done.
Wonderful.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks very much,
Thank you,
guys.
James.
Cheers, guys.
Have a
See
great
ya.
evening.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.